Hey there folks, it's me TheTacticalBrit, and Hell Let Loose Update 9 is officially here. The Blood and Steel update has come to the game and introduces some new different features, some meta changes, and various different bits and pieces that aim to make the game a better experience. I've spent some time with Update 9 today and during a live stream as well, and I wanted to give you guys the full rundown of what's happening in this update, but also my feelings on the update so far, sort of with the bad, the okay, and the good, and kind of what needs to change here and there. Updates like Update 9 and Hell Let Loose ultimately are quality of life changes that will improve the overall picture of the game. It's also worth mentioning that whilst these updates go on, things are simmering in the background, like an entirely different development team making the console version, like the Eastern Front being fully developed, and various other content drops as well, happening all at the same time. So where an update may seem light in terms of feature set and what's being achieved, there are also considerations to be made on that front. That being said though, Update 9 offers a healthy update to the game, but there are some things that definitely still need some work. So let's start by looking at all of the major changes, and we'll go over all of these and talk about them individually. The first one is the armor change. Now this is kind of a minor major change, so to speak. It was more of a band-aid than a real fix. The armor system in Hell Let Loose at the moment, for those of you who don't play it, is pretty broken. It's clunky, it interacts badly with terrain, and the devs are committed to a full overhaul of armor, and it looks like they're going to be completely redesigned and redone before the release of the game. But in the meantime, they've reduced the damage of AT mines, they've improved the tank belt in terms of how much ammunition it has, they've reduced the damage done by bombing runs and artillery if it's not a direct hit, and they've done various different gear speed ratio changes, improvements to damage occlusion, which is very helpful, which effectively means that the damage delivered by a shell, for example, is more accurate. It's known as multi-point damage occlusion, and what it effectively means is that if I fire a tank shell at a fence and you are hiding behind a tiny post on the fence, you won't live. Rather than the fence absorbing all of the damage, the explosion will of course wrap around it to a degree, but it will also, hurt the limbs that are exposed, as you would expect it to do realistically. So improvements there, and they've also improved tank MG hit detection, and they are aware just fundamentally that armor isn't in a good place right now, and this is something that, much like many things in Hell Let Loose, will simply require time. Armor effectively is going to need a full overhaul in terms of the systems, in terms of its interaction with terrain, in terms of its physics, and they have committed to that. That is something they're doing, and as we learned in Squad with the lair overhaul, which was very important for that game, things that take time tend to be good things that come. They just take a little while to get there. So overall, a bit more of a band-aid than really a fix here for armor, but I'm sure most of the tankers at the moment will be remotely happy with some of these changes. I think the state of tanking is very low at the moment, so I guess it's a bit difficult for them to really be excited about this. The next one is meta changes, and the meta changes are interesting. There is some good, some bad here, and I want to talk about them generally speaking. So effectively they've changed a couple of things. To start with, you can no longer spawn garrisons in neutral sectors. You actually have to have control of a sector before you can drop a garrison. I think this is trying to reduce the sort of instant mid-rush meta that kind of plagues the game sometimes on certain game modes. Overall, I can say it hasn't really done that. People just rush the objective and leave one commander behind to build a garrison or something like that. And I don't really know whether or not this really worked. I don't really know what the intention was here. I think the intention was to build more of a front line, and if that's the case, then I guess it's a good thing. One of the big changes is that they've actually changed how long it takes to capture an objective. Capturing a strong point on offensive maps now takes 60 seconds instead of 120 seconds, giving the actual invading forces more time to do damage on a given objective. Don't really know how I feel about this one. Personally, I felt the timing was nearly already pretty much there. I think this change might actually lead to more steamrolls than intended. Another big issue as well is that there is a fundamental problem with how they've dealt with garrisons in this update. They're a bit strange. They're very strange. So at the moment, if you have an attacking garrison, as garrisons can now be placed in the first row and column of the map, it effectively means that an attacking garrison is a forward garrison, so it can be placed one row into the red zone. So it's a pretty good change. It tries to bring offensive gameplay into the fray. The issue is that all attacking garrisons can be dismantled in 5 seconds, and And the other big issue is that attacking garrisons are disabled if enemies are within 100 meters of the garrison. And that's a 100 meter radius, that's not 100 meters in a certain direction. And I think that's really problematic. I think fundamentally the garrison system just doesn't work as intended at the moment in terms of offensive garrisons. Defensive garrisons sort of make sense as far as I'm aware, you know, they don't get disabled within 100 meters, for example. But it's a very strange system. Fundamentally, I think garrisons should just work like habs in squad, where a hab can be placed more or less anywhere in terms of the attacking zones. I think it should only be the first row or two, though, in the grand scheme of things, to really try and create a front line to the war, as opposed to lots of weird circular mishmash warfare, which is what we've had in the past. Prior to a few updates ago, you could basically place a garrison anywhere, and it basically meant that rather than defending a front line, it was more defending a 360 circle, and it ultimately meant that the second somebody got a garrison behind you, you were more or less cooked. So it's a really tricky situation to balance, but personally, again, first row or two, and my biggest thing would be that a garrison doesn't disable itself within 100 meters. If enemies get close to it, the timer for spawn should go up unless that garrison is cleared. Treat it exactly like the habs in squad and you're onto a winning formula. Another big issue that has changed with the meta is something I didn't really feel needed to change. At the moment, they have changed the way that garrisons work and also how airheads work as well. Airheads now are alive for 3 minutes instead of 2 minutes, which means that the whole enemy team can effectively spawn behind you and finish off the last objective. But the major issue here is every time a sector is lost, every single node is destroyed instantly. Now, for those of you who are unaware, nodes are what forms the command route in the game. It means that commanders can build resources and deploy tanks and deploy various different armaments and supplies that will help out you in the fundamental attack on any given objective. Destroying every node every time you lose an objective means that engineers are probably going to spend most of their games trying to build nodes and trying to get nodes online, and you know, those nodes will disappear, then they'll have to build more nodes. It's a very strange system. I don't really know if this was a needed change. It just seems like something that they changed for the sake of change. Fundamentally, I think the node system, again, much like armor, is something that needs a full rework and full reimagining. Other critical changes include the introduction of a melee system, which is really, really good. I've needed this for a while. The number of times I've ran out of ammo behind enemy lines or just wanted a quiet melee kill that didn't make too much noise is very, very important. So I'm glad this finally made it into the game. The MG34 is in the game now, which is super exciting because the MG34 is kind of a more accurate but less fast fire rate weapon than the MG42, and actually was utilized more, generally speaking, in the World War II setting. So really exciting. I've used it a couple of times now and it's been great fun. Some people have reported a few bugs here and there, but fundamentally I think it's a great weapon. And another interesting introduction is the introduction of a Utah Beach offensive mode, which is something that we simply haven't had before, both US and German forces on this side of things. This is really, really good. This is an expansion of previous existing content, which is exciting, although there are some issues at the moment with artillery shells landing too close to spawns, but I imagine that's something that can be patched out or fixed, generally speaking. A big introduction of the admin and spectate camera for server admins has gone live, which means that admins of individual servers will be able to look into players more specifically. Cheating and hacking isn't that common in Hell Let Loose anyway, but having the ability to give admins full control to look around in Hell Let Loose and be certain that nothing strange is happening is really a great warranted feature, and I'm sure it'll also be useful for those who play competitive Hell Let Loose or people who just want to document really cool games. A great introduction, really excited for this, and I think any and more power given to admins is a good thing, just because, you know, the admins are the lifeblood of these communities, and most of them do a stellar job as it is. They've also made barbed wire functional. There are some issues at the moment where it's not entirely working in a few places, but it will slow you down, and I believe there is potential for it to deal a small amount of damage as well. They've also made changes to sprinting. If you now sprint and then fire your weapon immediately, your bullets won't be entirely accurate. There's like a small cooldown period or a stagger period between you being entirely accurate and that actually being a thing. Really nice introduction. Will make people think a little bit more about when they're not sprinting. They've also fixed the majority of foliage in the game and effectively made it load in correctly. I still think this needs tweaking. Fundamentally, foliage stops loading in at about seemingly 70 meters in front of you, and that is, I don't know, The problem with foliage, right, is that people believe in the game that if they're hiding in a bush, then they're safe. But if that bush doesn't load in 70 meters away, then that's a bit of a problem. So I really do believe that foliage needs more of a rework here, whether that's increasing the distance of which it renders in, optimizing it more, whatever it so happens to be. Now, obviously, hard foliage like trees, rocks, large hedgerows, they still, work perfectly fine, but I think there's just a continuing issue here. I've also noticed a lot of visual pop in with some of these foliage assets, and it can be quite distracting if you're looking at the floor, and it doesn't look particularly good either. Another huge change, and probably the best change in this update, which I wasn't really expecting, was an overhaul of footstep sounds. Yes, the footstep sounds sound a bit more generic now. It kind of sounds like you're standing on pasta or like stepping on spaghetti that's dry. In some cases it changes, and obviously the audio changes depending on the surface, but it is just overarchingly a better positional audio system at the moment. I've had a lot of instances where I have slowed down and heard enemies running past me, and I've been able to positionally identify where that is and just absolutely execute them for it. Really great. Having good footstep audio is really exciting, and something that I'm really glad they changed and introduced. Dismantling friendly blueprints in the area is now much quicker, down to 2 seconds, and blueprints are automatically despawned after 2 minutes, I believe, at the moment, which is much better than what it was before, where they would just sit there. Another small but significant change is that tanks and all explosives can now destroy enemy and friendly mines, so if you have an explosion go off near a friendly mine, it will take that mine out. They've also changed the look of certain guns in terms of what they look like in front of you, added some SFX for the game, including footstep audio, as well as the bar, which sounds really great. They've also completely added the community voiceover death sound effects, which is really exciting, and they've also given a mic volume slider to reduce distorted player voices, which is really cool. One thing I would say though is that I would really like if the game let you set up your microphone before you started, or whether you first install the game, whatever it so happens to be. The number of players I face who have really loud distorted mics and I end up having to mute them because it's just downright irritating is a bit problematic. So just show them a bar that, red is bad, green is okay, yellow is good. Just stop them peaking in game and let them select the individual audio device that they want to use. I know that can be an issue sometimes where it just picks whatever Windows is using, and sometimes Windows randomly will choose whatever the hell it pleases. So that's something I definitely want to see. They've also added partial controller support. There are some weirdness, or terms of, I don't even know if weirdness is the right word really. Partial controller support, of course, there is no aim assist because it's PC, but it just feels a bit odd. I'm definitely going to do my best to work with the developers of the game as much as I humanly can as a controller player to try and flesh out what that would look like on console and how that's going to perform in future. At the moment it seems okay, but there seems to be some weirdness going on with how the analog sticks feel as it presently stands. Lots of various other small fixes with everything going on in the game, and there was also an overhaul of UI. Now this has been quite a contentious issue in the discords that I've been watching. Overarchingly, I would say the UI looks better, the game looks less cluttered, less in your face, less jarring. They've also added a few timers so you can change certain HUD elements to switch off and on at certain times. For example, if we capture an objective, you can now disable it saying, oh, well, this objective's captured. Like, you don't need to know that that's the case every single time. You just sort of know by looking at the map. So a much more immersive experience. The one issue they do have is kind of two things. They've disabled a lot of the server-side text, which personally I think is a good thing. A lot of it was just in your face in the spawn screen constantly, and it just looked bad, and it, I play on the same servers all the time. I don't need to see walls of text. However, I would like that to be something that appears for new players or players who have only been on for like a week or so, or whatever it so happens to be, kind of like a toggle option, much like exists in Squad. Same thing with server admin messages. They're kind of in the top left corner now, which is great. They look really small, they don't bother you, they don't distract you, but again, these are things that should be elements that are resizable, toggleable, and more importantly, none of these should make it harder for admins to identify what server they're in, which is currently an issue because you can't actually see the server you're in once you're in it. And obviously if you're an admin with like 5 or 6 servers, that can be problematic. But I'm all for a cleaner UI and making things look more immersive, more tidy, less in your face. I hate it when games go for some weird, you know, Battlefield 2 project reality approach where there's like walls of text in front of you constantly. It looks bad and it doesn't look good on the game. The only thing I would change here is that they have weird numbers for the garrisons, and for some reason you can see other squads' outpost spawns. I don't need that. Like, show me where they are on the map, but I don't need it in the list because I can't spawn on those outposts, so those outposts being in the list makes no sense. They've also, like, called various different garrisons, like Garrison 1, Garrison 2. It would be much better, in my opinion, if they ordered the list of spawns based on the distance to the front line, so the closest is first, and the further back is second, third, and fourth, and so on and so forth. But I think it would also be better if these were just named based on location, positioning, whatever it so happens to be. They're just called like Garrison 001, and that just doesn't really do anything for you. So changing that would be great. Also adding some colors back to the friendly outposts would be good. On the map previously, there was like a green tinge to your outpost, your squad's outpost, so you knew that it was yours. That seems to have gone now, and I kind of think that should stay back. But fundamentally, yeah, it just looks much cleaner, much better. There are a few other small issues here and there. I've noticed some weird, like, loading issues in terms of buildings just looking like, you know, clay in the distance, which can be a problem, bearing in mind that, you know, there might be a machine gunner in the window of one of those buildings, but the building hasn't loaded in properly, so I can't exactly tell the location. But these are all like minor issues that I'm sure will be hotfixed, alongside various different other issues like the text and how things are working in the UI right now. But fundamentally, I would say that this has been quite an upgrade. For those of you waiting on optimization, optimization seems to be very hit or miss here. In some maps, I seem to have really great frames and lots of good frame stability. In other maps, that seems to crumble instantly, and I get a lot more frame drops. So it's very strange. Sometimes a bit hit or miss here, and I think optimization is still something that, of course, needs to be on the agenda. I would like it to be in the, you know, 100 FPS regions a bit more healthily, much like Squad is at the moment. And seemingly I still get very odd micro stutters every once in a while, and I can't tell whether those are just major frame drops or whatever, but I think that's something that a lot of people still experience. But fundamentally, U9 seems to be a pretty good update. They've actually done some pretty good things. Fundamentally, I think the game has improved. I think they're introducing new systems and better things that will improve the game. I think the biggest issues at the moment are the meta changes, which need to be revisited again, armor systems which need to be overhauled, and the third and arguably the largest issue is that I really do feel as though that the game needs to go back and look at the composition of the infantry in individual teams. There are too many automatic weapons at the moment, I feel. Too many machine guns, too many bars, too many SMGs, and standard issue rifles are steadily phasing out of the game in a way that I don't think works, and in a way that I think makes the meta of the game statistically quite worse. So that's something I think needs revisiting again. Of course, it's all early access. Stuff changes every week in these games, but fundamentally a solid update. I'm interested to hear your thoughts in the comment section below. As always, thank you for watching, and I'll catch you in another video.